3 intermediate gnu/linux distributions recommendations for intermediate users, meaning someone who is already somewhat knowledgeable on the systems perhaps, and or knows enough about computers to figure them out, not necessarily the most beginner-friendly operating systems, although a beginner can also use these distros, of course. Depends on the person, some people know more or less about computers. Anyway, get to the distros. The first recommendation, Mageia gnu/linux. Mageia is based on the Mandriva distro, and good reasons for using it are, for example, the installer. When it is being installed the system, it allows the user to select various software programs individually what to install on the system. Basically, there are a number of desktop environments, for example, but there are also individual packages under the desktop environment options in the settings. Not the settings, the options in the installer. There's the toggle to enable the individual packages. I don't remember what it's called, but anyway, there is all kinds of advanced features like all kinds of network share systems, Samba servers and router things, and all kinds of advanced things like that. So Mageia comes with a lot of customization options right from the install. So it's really good if you want to have your setup be as you want it. You have to choose each program separately that you want to use. And also, another good thing about Mageia is that it has the control center, which is really good. Also, another thing I should mention about the installer is that it comes with an option to only use free software. Free as in freedom. So there's an option to only install free software and disregard any proprietary software. Yes, that is good. I also mentioned the number of desktop environment options. Also, another thing about that is that you don't need to download separate ISOs to get access to multiple desktop environments. You just choose the desktop environment in the install. So there's one ISO and you just choose the desktop environment when you're installing it, so that's good. That's how all distros should be. I don't understand why for some distros they make it so there are different ISOs for different desktop environments. That's really weird. Anyway, it comes with many desktop environments. Overall, it's a really good distro. It's really good for all kinds of workstation purposes and of course for general purpose computing, and also, of course, I imagine also for those network sharing things too. I haven't used it for those purposes, so I wouldn't know, but it comes with those options in the installer, so I imagine it's good for that purpose too. Anyway, it's a pretty good distro for all kinds of use cases. Yes. Then the next distro of recommendation is the Fedora distros. Fedora and all the derivatives like Nobara also, which is basically just Fedora with some changes. Now that distro, it's pretty powerful for the end user and has all kinds of software, all kinds of those gaming things and whatever. Like I mentioned, the Nobara, that I would recommend for like the gamers and whatever who like to play video games and all that. So basically Fedora and the Nobara are basically the same thing. Nobara is just Fedora with some changes. So if you want to play your Windows games and all that, then you can use the Fedora or the Nobara. Yeah. Also, the Fedora, standard Fedora comes with only free software in the repositories. You have to manually enable proprietary software. Of course, it is still, of course, the kernel is still going to have some proprietary firmware, but that's not necessarily too important. Anyway, but that's probably still worth mentioning. Oh, and also that's also the case for Mageia too. I didn't mention that. Yeah, Mageia also has the firmware, of course, in the kernel, even if it allows installing only free software. But anyway, back to Fedora. Fedora has some of those. Fedora has unofficial spins for different desktop environments. This is one of those operating systems that come with different ISOs for each desktop environment, which is really weird. So if you want to have some specific desktop environment, you have to go and download the discrete ISO for that specific desktop environment. Now, Fedora, it is a decent operating system. Yeah, well, I don't really have much to say about that, I guess. Then the third recommendation is Garuda. Now, Garuda is basically the ARX operating system, but it comes with a GUI, so you don't have to do the terminal installation. But also, Garuda adds all kinds of software that ARX doesn't have, at least pre-installed. I wouldn't know if that can be installed. Actually, I don't really care. Anyway, Garuda comes with all kinds of software that makes managing the ARX system easier. In that, ARX has often these weird problems, sometimes with these repository things. The package manager, it has to be maintained. Basically, you have to maintain the package manager. It sometimes breaks and you have to fix it. So Garuda has these sorts of GUI tools that you can use to fix them basically with just one click, and the thing is fixed. So Garuda is good for those people who want to have an ARX system, but who don't necessarily like the terminal installation. That's why this is the list of the 3 intermediate recommendations. ARX would be a very advanced recommendation then. So Garuda is good for those people, like I say, who want to have like the sort of power of ARX, so to speak. It comes with the AUR and all that ARX stuff. Some people like that stuff. I guess also like the gamers and the likes could also use ARX-based systems for that reason. If they don't want to just use ARX itself, Garuda is a distro that is basically ARX, but it makes it easier. There is this other operating system, Manjaro, that is also based on ARX, and it makes the use of ARX easier, like that also similarly to Garuda, but I wouldn't recommend Manjaro anymore. Manjaro has basically lost its reputation in a lot of ways, and it's not even a good distro based on ARX necessarily, because, well, due to the way that Manjaro holds back its packages to increase stability, it also breaks the AUR and all kinds of stuff like that. And Manjaro, the developers of Manjaro have made some stupid mistakes and all that, so they can't necessarily be trusted to make a good operating system. So I wouldn't recommend using Manjaro anymore. Basically, the purpose that Manjaro would exist for, to make the use of ARX easy, Garuda does that better. So the reason many would have to use Manjaro it is better fulfilled by using Garuda. Garuda basically is ARX. It just has some GUIs to make it easier to use by default. Yeah. Garuda, for what kinds of people it is? Well, I guess it's like I mentioned, the gamers and the like. If you want to have an ARX system for some reason, then yeah, that's my recommendation for ARX-based systems. Yes. One thing I forgot to mention, but I should also say about all the operating systems, is the release model. Mageia is a static release. It comes with static releases. Of course, it gets security updates and all kinds of things like that, but each release is a new ISO and it's a new release. You have to then install the new release when the old one goes end of life. So it's a static release. Then Fedora is a sort of semi-rolling distro where it is a static release also, but there are some software packages that kind of roll. They get newer features and there are like kernel and driver updates. They are like the latest versions. Some software might stay the same, but there are still new release versions. Yeah, it's a sort of semi-rolling distro. And then, of course, Garuda is a full rolling release. So it doesn't come with discrete releases. It doesn't come with new ISO releases. It just has the same version basically that's perpetually updated because it's a rolling release. So that's an important detail I forgot to mention about each of the distros when I was talking about them. But it is important to mention, so I'm mentioning it now at the end. Yes. So that was the list of 3 recommendations. These are not the only 3 operating systems that I might ever recommend, but it is 3 recommendations. Right. So that's basically like for general purpose use and more or less for that sort of workstation and gaming types that this list is for. So that's that.